Okay, so this is a somewhat personal video and just advance notice. It's going to be a video with more left-wing leaning. At least I suppose that's the way it would be interpreted. I want to talk about the welfare system in the UK, unemployment welfare specifically, and just my personal experience of what's now known as universal credit. Um, I've been through unemployment and a few months ago, I took the decision to sign on, as it's colloquial known in this country. That basically means you are signing into the government program. You receive financial aid from the state in return for signing up to very strict obligations. Now, I'm going to make an account here of my experience of this, and what people take from that is beyond my control. But I'm quite critical of the way this is run. A few disclaimers I want to make. I've always believed in personal responsibility. So if you're receiving money from the state, of course I agree you have obligations. Let me make that absolutely clear. However, I do not believe that unemployment is a crime. And I believe that the Conservative Party in particular treats the unemployed as criminals in everything but name. Um, they repeatedly use it in their election propaganda and really angers me sometimes, to be quite honest. Um, The former Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Ian Duncan Smith, was deeply unpopular with Britain's claimants because this was a man who spoke about social justice, but whose policies, which were given the green light by David Cameron and so called Big Society, directly led to many suicides. This is irrefutable because what the government, well, I'll just talk about my experience first and talk about some of the other issues. So I signed on. Had to go through very condescending sort of interviews. And the thing about this is, if you've been through the job centre, you'll know what I'm talking about. And most people would agree or empathize with this sort of experience. What I find is that there's a very, very subtle but very obvious condescending attitude, which basically treats people as sort of an assumption of guilt. So you have to sign up to all sorts of agreements like you're going to and there's one particular aspect of this I'm extremely critical of. You're basically obliged under universal credit. It's the new name for job seekers allowance. In fact, it's a blanket term for as I understand it, every welfare payment. um, they try to sing its praises and say that it helps you find work and all the rest of it. That's very dubious, but anyway, the obligation with this is 35 hours a week job search. Now, the money you receive from the state is £317 if you're a single unemployed person. So let's just put this into context. £317, 35 hours a week job search. Okay? £317 a month, 35 hours a week job search. That's 140 hours a month. This is very strict. Now, people might say, oh, well, they're never going to know. Catch is you have to keep an online diary and you actually have to write, for example, your work activity. Went for interview at such and such a place, spent time on this job website, spent time writing cover letters, whatever it is, and you need to write the time frame afterwards. So, for example, spent time writing cover letters, 2 hours. Now, I can say these things because I am no longer in the system. Um, I done my level best to meet that obligation because I didn't want to be sanctioned. And the thing about this system is you're under constant threat from sanction. All it takes is the say of your advisor, and they can sanction you. What that basically means is the money is held back for a month in some cases. I never went through that, but basically they're very quick to sanction people. I believe this is abhorrent because it's basically using sort of blackmail for people who are in financial dire straits. And I think it's very difficult for people who are in a regular job to really have understanding of this. I'm talking about everyone, but a lot of people will sort of stick their nose up and say, "Oh, what are the unemployed whinging about?" Well, I ask you, would you work? Because that's what the job search is intended to be. They tell you treat it like work. That's your job over the time that you're claiming universal credit for approximately £2.50. I believe that's what it works out at. £2.50. That's much less than the national minimum wage. And you're basically being forced to do that. And the thing is, it isn't just that it's a very draconian sort of timeline. I don't know which bureaucrat in Whitehall thought up that figure, or which bureaucrat in the Department of Work and Pensions. It's a ridiculous figure. Um, it's just an absurd figure, 35 hours a week. Um, People will say, "Oh, I work 35 hours a week." The difference is you're being paid a lot more than what the unemployed are being paid to do this work, which is what it's being treated as. That's what people need to understand. I get really angry when I hear this expression, free money. It's bullshit. The unemployed do not get free money because if they did, there would be no obligations. And it would just be a case that the government's giving them money and, they can sit back and do nothing. The fact of the matter is there are very strict obligations. If you don't go to a meeting, you get sanctioned. If you don't meet this 35 hours a week, you get sanctioned. And there's that constant threat of sanctions. Virtually every piece of correspondence, so whether it be letters through the post or every fortnightly meeting, you have to go to fortnightly meetings with an advisor where they basically interrogate you for 20 minutes and, ask you what you've been doing to find work. But it almost seems, in my experience, my advisor was, she would just patronize me for the sake of it. She once told me that my CV was too detailed. And then in the same meeting, she told me I had to sell myself for more. This is ridiculous. And a lot of people have this experience. And frankly, I don't want to, collectively attack all advisors because they're not all bad. And I understand these people are just trying to do their job. And it's not an easy job, but some of them, frankly, are just jobs worths. They look at their computer. If you've ever seen the sketch from Little Britain, where I forget the character's name, but she says, "Computer says no." It really is like that sometimes. I mean, my advisor was infuriating, but I knew I couldn't lose my temper or I couldn't. Basically, I had to just play along with it because if I contradicted her, I mean, she actually, in the end, I voluntarily pulled myself out of the system, but she told me that I would be going into a work program. Now, what this basically means is you're sent to a company and you have to work for so many hours. Now, people who are in a regular job say, "Oh, what are you whinging about? We have to work." There's a big difference. You get paid for it. And that is a fundamental difference. So basically, under this Tory government, and frankly, the last Labour government wasn't much better, unemployed people are treated like offenders doing community service. So law abiding citizens who are unemployed for a variety of reasons, because despite what the gutter press says, this is not a case that people just enjoy being unemployed. I get it. There are some people who would take advantage of the system, and I get it. There are problem families and so on, and there are people who abuse the system and they're claiming unemployment benefit for years and all the rest of it. But to be quite frank, the red top press, aided by, as far as I'm concerned, scumbags like Jeremy Kyle, what they do is they take extreme cases, right? So they will take, let's say, I don't know, uh, some guy who's had four different partners and 11 children, and he's claiming thousands in benefit, and he's doing drugs or something, and they'll take that sort of situation and say this is the norm. Now, I'm not saying those cases do not exist; they do. But what the likes of Jeremy Kyle does and the Red Top Press, they plaster that all over the front page, or in the case of Jeremy Kyle, as his headline grabbing show, and they try to tell people this is the norm when it isn't. A lot of people, given the choice, would not want to sign on. You know, I could still be signing on if I wanted to. Right now, I'm technically unemployed. I could still be signing on and getting that 317 per month, but I voluntarily left because I refused to be exploited, and that's what it is. And this isn't about feeling sorry for myself, it's about taking control. I'm not saying I'm a victim. And there is that choice to pull out. But it's not a great choice. It's basically face financial uncertainty or be exploited. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the path of trying to find work myself. Actually, as it turns out, I have a job coming up anyway. I went for an interview and it looks like good news. It looks like I'm probably going to get that job. Um, so I've done that myself. But basically, degrading people, forcing them to do 35 hours a week job search, you're going around in circles with the best will in the world. What you're going to do is go around in circles because the job site, there will be new jobs occasionally, but if you have a certain level number of skills, you simply cannot apply for jobs that you don't have skills in. You can't. I don't have a driving license, so I can hardly apply for a job which requires driving skills. You know, um, and unfortunately, a large portion of the public still get influenced by what they see in the red top press or from right wing propaganda. And this is maybe the fundamental reason why I could never ever support the Conservative Party. Because for all the talk about social justice and the big society, they have for years vilified the unemployed as lazy benefit scroungers. They will deny that. But in the 2010 general election, and to a lesser extent in the 2015 general election, they had big billboards saying, "We will force the unemployed to work," and all this sort of thing. So what they're doing is scapegoating people who cannot defend themselves. You know, an unemployed person cannot stand up to the power of the Murdoch press, so it's not a level playing field. I get so sick of people saying it's free money. If it was free money, the government would just be giving you money and they say, "Oh, you take that." There'd be no obligations. But the point is, there's very, very strict obligations. You're constantly threatened with sanctions. Unless you've been through something, you cannot judge it. Don't judge people until you've been in the shoes. It's as simple as that. And it's not about, you know, saying feel sorry for us or something like that. I've always said if you're unemployed, yeah, you do have obligations if you're receiving money from the state. But by the same token, if people are law abiding citizens, being unemployed is not a crime in itself. People are unemployed for a variety of reasons. They may be between jobs, they may have been made redundant, they may be going through serious um, problems, mental health problems. There's a variety of reasons why people are unemployed. And society needs to be just a little bit more compassionate and understanding. Sure, there's people who abuse it, and I condemn that. It's wrong. It's wrong on people who are working hard and paying the tax, and it's also wrong on honest people who are claiming welfare for sincere reasons because they genuinely need the money at a time when they're trying to find work. Another point, though, I would add about the welfare system: when this was set up in the 40s, it was intended as cradle to grave protection, right? And the point is, it is open to everyone. Now, the system is very flawed, as I have spoken about, but the principle of it is open to everyone. So if you sort of look down on the unemployed and say, "Oh, they're lazy," you could find yourself made redundant, then you may have to sign on. What happened after the Great Recession is a lot of people who had previously been very snobby and looked down on the unemployed found themselves in that position, and then they soon changed their attitude. Unemployment is not fun. Do you think it is easy or comfortable facing constant financial anxiety? Well, if life is so easy for the unemployed, why do you think the suicide rate is higher for unemployed people than people in regular work? So I'm not saying, feel sorry for the unemployed and treat them like charity. I'm just saying don't judge people unless you've been in their shoes. And I believe that the approach that the Tories take, and New Labour was no better, of degrading people, of treating them like criminals, of imposing these ridiculous draconian rules like 35 hours a week job search is bullshit. It's just a degrading approach. I mean, I don't know who thought up that figure, but even if you say you go for interviews, you apply for jobs, you make phone calls, even if you try all of that, it's very, very difficult to attain that 35 hours a week sort of target. I actually said to my advisor, well, wait a second, are you going to sanction me if it adds up to 34 hours? Okay, I was being a little bit sarcastic, but I thought it was so ridiculous. And to be fair, she said, no, no, not going to sanction you for that. But the point is, there is a constant threat of sanctions because it is in every piece of correspondence. They speak to you in a very condescending, talking down manner, and it's very unpleasant, very unpleasant. So if it was a case of we'll just get free money, then a lot of people will be rushing into the system. I suspect there are many, many people in a similar position to me who are unemployed, who are facing financial uncertainty, but they're not rushing to sign up precisely because of this. And by the way, going through depression and having to go to those fortnightly meetings is a very unpleasant experience. Anyway, I'm going to round this up. I hope I've elaborated on some level and informed people about what actually goes on with this. A few final points. If you think it's a case of the unemployed just getting free money, it really, really isn't the case. It's just not. Because there are very strict obligations, and if people don't meet those obligations, they're sanctioned. And you might say, oh, well, it's easy to fake that, but at some point they're going to catch you out. If you just make up things on your online diary, they're not stupid. They're going to find out, and then you'll be sanctioned. And for right or wrong, that's what would happen. I personally think 35 hours a week is nonsensical. Um, at least if you're going to ask people to do that, at least increase the amount that they're paid. Because I'm telling you now, £2.50 is what it amounts to. And they tell you to treat it like a job. So you're basically being told to work for £2.50 an hour. That's how they treat it. And I know trying to get through to the sort of mentality of the Daily Mail or the Daily Express or the Sun would be a waste of time because their preconceived idea is it's kind of like, oh, these lazy unemployed people will feel entitled. It's not about that. It's just about respect. It's about level playing field. You know, yes, if people are receiving money from the state, they have obligations, but those obligations shouldn't be degrading. They shouldn't be treating people like they're a criminal. And that's essentially what this does. So that's why I'm not overly enthusiastic about Mr. Crab running for Prime Minister. Although, to be honest, I'm probably biased against every work and pension secretary because there hasn't been any major reforms within this. For all the Tories talk of reforms, they're certainly no better than New Labour, if anything, they're worse in terms of treating the unemployed this way. And I'm not talking about waving the red flag and sharing the means of wealth or anything like that. I'm just talking about basic respect and fairness. That's all. If you're asking people to do 35 hours a week job search, then at least pay them a bit more that reflects that amount of time. Because for those people who are in regular jobs and look down at the unemployed, I ask you, would you work for that sort of time frame for that sort of money? I don't think you would. And unfortunately, there's a huge amount of prejudice and snobbery out there. I think it's probably improved. I think more people are informed now than they were before, like maybe 10 years ago, partly because more people have been through this experience. But there is still a lot of very hostile attitudes to the unemployed in this country, and the gutter press doesn't help. It's one reason I have contempt for what the Sun and the Express stand for, because they are constantly stirring up hatred. And yes, I use the word hatred against the unemployed, and it's disgusting, quite frankly. Unemployment is not easy, believe me. And if you've never been unemployed, frankly, you've no right to judge unemployed people if you've never had that experience. So, yes, there are people who abuse the system, and that's wrong, but just don't generalize. It's the same principle with anything. And universal credit, in my opinion, really needs to be reformed. This 35 hours a week figure is just stupid because people can apply for jobs, they can make cover letters and so on. It is very, very, very hard to attain that sort of figure. And in my opinion, it's extremely degrading, and then you have to prove that you've done it. It's extremely degrading. Um, And for all the way that advisors talk about their clients, they really look down on people, um, and that needs to change because this is not a level playing field. Claimants have very little choice in it. The only choice they have is to voluntarily leave, which is what I done. But when advisors say, "Oh, do you agree to be put onto this program?" You've no choice. You have to do it, otherwise you lose money. So it's basically blackmail. That's what it is. And like I say, if you're working hard and you're in a stressful job and you don't like it, you may well have a certain viewpoint about unemployed people. All I would say is, if you're not experiencing it, you're in no position to judge, because financial uncertainty, it causes just as much stress as being in a stressful job. And I am in a position to speak about both because I've been in both positions. I've been in very pressurizing jobs. I've worked long hours. I know what that's like. And I've also been unemployed. So I have experienced both worlds, and I'm telling you, it is not as easy as people think. It's just not. I mean, I am grateful that we have a welfare system in this country. That in itself is a good thing. But the system itself, there are many, many areas it needs to improve. And at the moment, the approach that this government takes is basically degrading people. And I doubt the future Prime Minister, whether it be May or Gove or whoever, unfortunately, I don't have much optimism that they will take a different approach because it's embedded in Tory thinking, unfortunately.